Good evening, Warehouse students. I'm laughing because every single time I go to film one of these videos, I leave my MacBook on picture. And so every time I'm sitting here, the 3, 2, 1 goes, and I get ready to start talking to you, and then it takes a goony picture of me, and then I have to delete it. And so it makes me laugh because I do the same thing every time. It's good to see you. My name's Justin, if you're not familiar. It's COVID-19 and we're kind of shifting things up now as June hits. So I don't know when you're watching this. I don't know where you are when you're watching this, but we're glad that you can join us. If you don't know, maybe you've been out of the loop or you just haven't heard, we're now trying to meet at Parks through June. So I'm not actually going to put the exact details in this video. Instead, look at the comments or the description of this video. That way we can edit it if things change. But through June, we're trying to meet in Parks. Check out the description section for junior high, senior high, where you meet, when you meet, and what all the details are. If you want to play a little game, whether you're at home and you have some friends with you or family with you, or you're a leader at a park and you just want to share maybe this part of the video, or just share like a picture of each of these slides, play a little game called Possibilities. And it's kind of like a Would You Rather, but instead there's 4 options. And so it's a silly, weird question, and you have 4 options of which one to pick. And so you can kind of share what the 4 options are, and everybody can choose what theirs is and defend it, just like you would a Would You Rather. So here you go for each one. We're not going to give it like a 30 seconds or 45 seconds. We'll do about 5 seconds, and you just pause it on each one of them and debate the possibilities. You've now shared your opinions, you've gotten very angry at each other, and you've maybe made some new best friends. So we are going to now transition into our Bible study for the night. So calm down a bit, get those mare bears, whatever that is. It kind of sounds scary. I would hate to meet one in the wild. Get the mare bears out of your head, as well as the giant rampaging duck from the sky. Get ready to jump into 1 Timothy. What we would like you to do, whether you're in a park with your small group or whether you're just at home, just wanting to connect with God and hear from Peter and I and stuff together. We just want to go through another Bible study, like as we looked at the month of June and even moving into July. Because we can't do big gatherings where we preach and then have small groups, instead we wanted to move more towards a model where you can study the Bible together and on your own. And so we're going to use observe, interpret, apply. You might be getting sick of hearing that. That's okay. I hope that in 30 years you wake up in the middle of the night sweating, terrified, and it just pops in your head, observe, interpret, apply, and you just can't get rid of it. I would love that. So just a reminder, observe is where we spend time looking at the text, underline things, ask questions, circle words you don't understand, right? You're just looking at what is there in the text. Interpret is where you look at what does the text mean. So that includes trying to figure out what is Paul saying to the original audience that he was writing to, in this case, Timothy, one of his disciples and a pastor now at this church. What was Paul saying to Timothy? Well, what did he mean? And then how do you translate that to the 21st century, right? How do you bridge the gap from 1st century AD and middle of like Eastern Europe and the Greece area? How do you translate that all the way to Arvada, Colorado, 2021? And then how do you translate things written a lot of times to maybe adults, to a teenage context? Our world's quite a bit different even in how we treat teenagers. And so how would you, as a teenager, understand some of the things being said? And then we're going to apply. And so we take this stuff that we've observed, that we've then interpreted what it means, and we look at our lives and say, what should we do? What things need to change? Or maybe what's just an attitude or a posture towards God or towards others you can have because of this passage. So we're going to walk you through that again. We're going to be in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10. So I want to encourage you, you can pause this video at any time since it's not live, or a leader if you're leading a group through this. So get your Bibles out, get your pens and pencils, and get ready to study 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10 together. So you have your Bibles, you have 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10. The first thing we're going to do is observe. So take 3, 5, 7 minutes in your group, and you can just stay where you're seated. you can pause this video after I'm done talking right here and just spend some time with the text, circling things and coming up with what you see in the text. And then you're going to spend time as a group talking about what you saw. And then you can even watch right after I'm done talking, we're going to play a video of a couple students sharing some observations they had. So spend 3, 5, 7 minutes right now looking at the text. What do you see?
Okay, so as far as observations for 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10, my first one was the word overseer. I wasn't entirely sure what it meant. So I looked it up, and it basically is an elder or an overseer of a congregation. So it's, I guess, basically just a position of authority. And it's saying that anyone who wants to be an overseer has to follow these 14 kind of guidelines to be, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, all these things. And as I was reading them, they all kind of seem to fall under the umbrella of being responsible. And especially in, what verse was it? Verse 5, it says, "For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church?" So these people are given the responsibility to care for God's church. And so they really need to be responsible and follow these things. For my second observation, it was about the deacons. Their list of things that they need to embody or do or not do started in verse 8. It included that they must be dignified, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, and not greedy for dishonest gain, which gave less of the sense of management and more of the sense of just being upstanding people, that even if they're in a lower position, there's still a bar that they need to reach in order to be in that position. And my third observation, in verse 10, it said, "And let them be tested first." And it really drove home the point that this is an important job for people who have a strong faith, who really, really trust in God, and who are ready to, be in that, pick up that responsibility and that embody those traits.
What's up, Warehouse? Here are my observations for 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10. My first observation is that overseers and deacons have special requirements for these positions. My second observation is that overseers and deacons are men. My third observation is that overseers' requirements seem to be more focused on the characteristic of the person. My fourth observation is that deacons' requirements seem to be more focused on his spiritual walk and his spiritual work. My fifth observation is that overseers must be well-liked by non-believers. And my final observation is that being an overseer is a noble task.
Thank you, Tanya and Angela, for giving us those observations and for doing the study for this week. We love watching students read through the Bible and understand what it means and apply it to their lives. So this is really cool for Peter and I. So yeah, you've had some observations. You've looked at the text. You've shared it. You've listened to Tanya and Angela talk about it. Now it's time for interpretation. So you're going to spend some time just on your own, again, whether you're at home or in your group, and you're going to be looking at what does the text mean? What's Paul saying to Timothy? How does that translate to the 21st century? And how do you take that as a teenager? Spend some time, 3, 5, 7 minutes, figure out what does this text mean?
And for my interpretations, from the whole section, I got the idea that neither of these positions are for just anybody or everybody. They are for those people who are willing to shoulder the responsibility of becoming better people, and who have a lot of faith and will lean on God for the strength for that. And something that definitely transcends time is when someone is in a position of authority, they will automatically be looked to for guidance, and also people will be looking at them to see if they practice in their lives what they are teaching, if they're practicing what they preach, I guess. And I feel like that's a big thing of what Paul is talking about here, or why he's giving these guidelines. Obviously just because these are good things to follow, but also because they will be in a position of authority and they will be looked to and expected to show others through, not just through words, but also through their lives, how they need to live.
Now, on to my interpretations. My first interpretation is that anyone who wants to be an overseer must be worthy of that title, based off of verses 1 through 7. My second is that deacons must be people of God who aren't troubled by the mysteries of their faith, based off of verse 9. My third is that overseers must be liked by both believers and non-believers because of the word also in verse 7. My fourth is that men are to be in charge of their household, and that's based off of verse 4. My fifth is that it seems as if overseers are the equivalent to pastors nowadays because of the qualifications, especially the one requirement that states that he must be able to teach in verse 2. My sixth is that becoming conceited brings the same judgment that the devil receives, and that's based off of verse 6. And my seventh is alike it, in that recent converts are more likely to become conceited, and therefore receiving the same judgment as the devil, also in verse 6. My eighth is that one of the devil's traps is for overseers to be hated by non-believers or outsiders, and that's from verse 7. My ninth is that an overseer's children are to obey him, not out of fear or something else like that, but because their father is conducting them in a manner that's worthy of respect, and that's based off of verse 4. My 10th is that if being an overseer is a good work or noble task, as stated in verse 1, then the actions in verse 2 through 7 are also good works and noble tasks. This also means that the opposite of these tasks are bad works. For example, drunkenness is a bad work or unnoble deed. My 11th is that if overseers are to have a good reputation with those outside the church, as stated in verse 7, then that means we are to have relationships with those outside the church. For how can we have a good reputation with outsiders if we don't have a relationship with them? So we're supposed to hang out with Christians and non-Christians. My 12th is that God's church is like a family. The way that I know this is that because the requirements that are in verse 5, for if God's church wasn't like a family, why would we have this comparison?
This particular text from Paul to Timothy is interesting because it's about overseers and deacons, which we don't talk a lot about, right? We don't really even call anybody older overseers. In some places call people deacons, right? This could maybe be like pastors and elders, right? We don't exactly have a perfect analogy. The idea, though, is like Tanya said, these are people in positions of leadership, right? They have influence. They have some authority. But ultimately, these are guidelines for what it means to be a godly person, right? If you're in a leadership position, you're expected to be living a certain way and to have a high standard of life. And so I want you to do two things together. So the first thing I want you to do, maybe if you already talked about this, you can skip this part of the video, but what I want you to do is to take all of those qualifications, all of those things that Paul laid out that overseers and deacons should be, and first I want you to rewrite that list. Write that list in a way that makes sense to you. Words that maybe make sense, because sometimes the Bible will use words like above reproach. Maybe you don't know what above reproach means. Spend some time thinking about it, talking about it. If you're at home, you can try to look up maybe what without above reproach even means. And go through that list and maybe rewrite it for the 21st century for now. And then after you do that, I want you to take that rewritten list and I want you to write a new list next to it for students. Right? Some of those things will hopefully transfer over. Some of those things might be pretty different. So how would you make a list of what it would look like to be a student leader or a student with influence? Whether that's at Warehouse, whether that's at your home, whether that's in your school. What would it look like to have a list of things that Paul would maybe say, hey, if you want to be a student that leads other students, that lives and loves like Jesus right where they are, this is maybe what you should hope to be like. Write that list out, and then you can have kind of a student list in front of you as we move on to application. So we're going to spend some time now. You can pause the video now if you need to do that. We're going to move into application. So you've looked at the text, you've observed it, you've interpreted, you've looked at what does it mean, what did it used to mean, what does it mean now, how does that meaning then go to students, and now you're going to apply the text. So you're going to spend some time by yourself, even if you're in a group, and you're going to look at application. And I want you to look at two different kind of ways of doing application. One is looking at universal application, saying how should people put this text into their life? Just generally, right? Like how should people in general apply this text? What are some universal principles? What are some things that maybe we can apply to the Christian faith? And then I want you to take a stab at doing some personal application. Like how should you, right? Kyle Paulson, right? How should you, Grace Beck, right? How should you apply this to your life? And then write that down. And then take some time in your group and discuss how does it apply? How does it apply to you as a collective group? And how does it apply to you as an individual?
And a general application could be just recognizing when you're in a position of authority, even if it's a small one, like just when you're, with little siblings or something. Just knowing that it's almost part of your job to to embody the good traits, or to be a good example, I guess would be a more common term. Yeah, just to keep that in mind. And for more personal application, I guess, it would be just for me to remember that there's probably always somebody who is looking up to you or to me. And because of that, it's really important to be kind of like on your best behavior.
Now, my first application is that we should strive to achieve the characteristics mentioned in this passage, even if we're not trying to be an overseer or deacon. My second is that we need to submit to the authority in our lives. My third is don't become conceited. My fourth is to make relationships with those that are outside the church. My fifth is to treat those around you as family, even if they're not your physical family. My sixth is to do things in a manner that's worthy of respect. My seventh is to maintain a good reputation. And my eighth is to always act in a way so that you can pass the test that is in verse 10. Thanks.
Well, thank you all for joining us for another Wednesday, as they seem to be crazy and weird and changing all the time. So if you're at home, thanks for jumping in and doing a study. Hopefully this was beneficial and fun. If you're in a park right now, hopefully if you're junior high, I'll be wandering around, but just spend some time sharing prayer requests with each other, pray for each other, and then hang out, have fun, talk. Remember, go home at 8:30. Your parents should be there to pick you up. But it's been another great night. I'm excited to see you live at the park because I'm filming this on Tuesday. So, hopefully I'll see you soon or now, depending on when you're watching this. Bye. We love you, Warehouse.